Let's very quickly do Epistemology 101 because I get a lot of questions about philosophy and where to start with philosophy. And epistemology is one of those branches that's just kind of like, why is this there? Like, who cares? Or anyway, that's how I thought about it for a long time. The word epistemology from the Greek literally means the study of knowledge, of understanding. If you look up epistemology, you'll find it deals with knowledge, its scope, its origins, the methods of acquiring it. That's all well and good, but what does this mean? Why is anybody talking about this? Who cares? What do we do with it? And basically, there are two schools of thought. There is Platonic epistemology and there is anti-Platonic epistemology. Or, sorry, not anti-Platonic, Aristotelian, that's the word. But the highest form of knowledge, according to Platonic epistemology, is episteme, the word from which epistemology comes, which is knowledge that is correct, that you can justify with an argument. This is the aim of the Socratic dialogues. And it's difficult to get to that. You're left with a lot more questions than you are answers, and that's why so many of the early Platonic dialogues end with confusion. They do not reach episteme. Now, the anti-Platonic or the Aristotelian, it's kind of a joke, but it's kind of not a joke. Aristotle puts a lot more stock into sensory data. He's really interested in nature, in observation, and in what you can learn from observation. But you see the limits of that sort of thing in some of the observations that he made. Stuff like geocentrism, things to do with gravity, and all manner of things about the behavior of various non-human species. I realize I'm coming off as incredibly anti-Aristotle biased, which is really not my intention. But I'm also not going to do anything to correct it, so. Anyway, the Plato-Aristotle epistemology debate evolves over the following millennia. At the end of the day, if it were a perfect binary, the central debate of epistemology is nature versus nurture, empiricism versus nativism, tabula rasa versus innate ideas. Way more people argue about this across the history of philosophy, but I promise to answer the question of who cares? Why do people bother thinking about this? And how can an understanding of epistemology benefit the modern practicer of philosophy? A lot of arguments in the history of epistemology have to do with theology, with like, how did God create us? But I think what are much more pressing questions today are things like, how do I know something is true? How do I decide something is true? How do I argue in support of this thing that I think is true? Is sensory data adequate to determine the truth? Or does there need to be some sort of reasoned argument behind it? As things like AI become more realistic, it becomes like way more difficult to trust your senses. How do you determine something is real or true when it looks real, but it's not? How do you differentiate true wisdom from fancy rhetoric? That's a really important one, and it was really important in Plato's time as well. So there are some practical applications of epistemology. Let me know in the comments if I missed any, and follow so you don't miss part 2 where I talk about Platonic epistemology. Doesn't that just roll off the tongue?